All right, Amber, take it away.
All right, thanks. Thanks for letting me join your meeting today. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit. Yeah, so I've been at the USOPC for a little bit over 11 years actually, and came from professional the WTA tour prior to that. So I was with the tour for almost 10 years as their medical director, and then in a nice quiet clinic in Hawaii before that. So somehow I shook my life up, and then now I'm in sports. So, but my main roles are really, obviously I do some clinical work still as well, but oversee a lot of the administrative aspects of all three of our clinics. So here in Colorado Springs, Chula Vista, California, and Lake Placid, New York. And so see those. I'm kind of the lead on the Paralympic side of the house from a medical perspective, and then the medical director for both the Olympics and the Paralympics. So this was in Tokyo, as a couple of you others have been, and we'll be heading to Beijing in less than 100 days now. So it's a quick turnaround and some challenging games with the COVID piece. But yeah, so I was just going to talk to you a little bit about the volunteer program and some of the, if you haven't done it, and so I know a couple have, there's been a couple changes since then. So let me see if this will work. Just to give you a little background. Is that working? Can you see it? Just the black screen. Good. Okay. So I just wanted to point out our mission statement changed, which I think is pretty interesting over the last couple of years. And we added the well-being piece, which obviously plays into what we do in sports med. So a lot has been focused on that. And obviously a lot has happened in the history, and a lot has been happening in the media right now with some of the trials and things, but it's been interesting how that shifted kind of what we do, and looking particularly at the mental health piece that is a big initiative that we've been working on. So USOPC is kind of in 4 different pillars. We've got the games, which is a massive piece, and we actually have a games every year. So actually this year we also have Youth Pan Am Games in Cali, Colombia, which is a great place to take a ton of minors. And so we're heading down there over Thanksgiving. And then we will be in Beijing in January through March. And then we've got the Youth Pan Am Games, the Beach Games, the Pan Am Games, Parapan, and then we'll be in Paris in just 3 years. So every year is a games year. We take pallets of equipment and all of our kind of full setup. We have a biofire, we have ultrasound, we have kind of all of our equipment that we might need. Then we have a national medical network, which is partners around the country that provide care at no cost to the athletes. So whether that's surgeries or consultations or a variety of things. And then we've got our training centers. So the 3 I mentioned, our site in Chula Vista is actually owned by the city of Chula Vista and not the USOPC anymore. And so
2 reasons. First, it's challenging for me. I was trying to read the words you were spelling.
There we go. And then that last one was just the Coalition for Prevention of Injury and Illness. So we're one of the IOC's 8 centers of excellence. So we get funding from the IOC to do research on prevention of injury and illness. And so we have a new associate director of research that just joined us this year, actually, is starting to put together our research plan and protocol. In the past, it's kind of been a little bit hit or miss, and we've been a little bit strategic in what we do because of competitive, advantage, but we're trying to do some other targeted research and have some pretty interesting outcomes out of the games, some of which we're not going to publish, including we did the IOC Sports Mental Health Assessment Tool, which just came out. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but we did that on over 1,000 athletes. So it's the largest group to ever complete that. And had some really interesting outcomes from that, actually depression and anxiety were fairly low. And then substance abuse and disordered eating disorder was actually fairly high in the 30 to 50% range as far as tracking. So just pretty interesting. And also the timing in which we asked those questions, whether we did it for our swimming team, we actually did it before trials. So before the team had been named, when they were probably more stressed. And then we did other teams right after, like track and field at trials, as soon as they'd made the team. So interesting to see how that will play out in the field. So these are our 3 sites. We do have volunteers at all 3 sites. And like I said a little bit earlier, we just instituted a vaccine mandate at the USOPC for all athletes and staff and anyone that accesses our facilities. This will also be the case for the Beijing, the entire delegation going to the games. And so once we kind of get that all in place, we'll be fully up and running again with full volunteers. We've been kind of pretty slim on that at the moment, just given all the COVID restrictions. This is kind of the breakdown of our medical team. So we're a pretty lean team, really on the ground. And we do some traveling with NGBs and some of the sports as well. But Colorado Springs is kind of our main hub. We've got mental health providers at all of our clinics now, and we're in the process of hiring a couple more out in
Amber,
Boston.
you're still at the first page of your
Oh,
presentation.
really? Why
So
is it not progressing? I don't know why it's doing that.
we did see the second page, but then it went back to the first page, I think.
See the pillars?
No, we're still on the swimming opening.
Oh gosh, I don't know why it does that. I feel like at this point we should have it down, right?
Here, I'll try this. Try it again. Yeah.
Let me stop
It needs to be in
sharing.
presentation mode. It said, somebody said.
Yeah, it is. And I just did a presentation the same way and it worked. So I don't know. Okay, well, if it doesn't work, I'll just talk through it. I don't want to waste time, but
Sorry.
try one more time here. Apologies and thank you for letting me know before I got all the way through. How about now?
Right now it's blank. Oh, there we go. I can see it. Yep. Now we can see
See the
it.
3 training centers?
Yep. Now we can see it.
Okay. Okay. Let me see if we can just. Now, let me, okay. Still see it?
Yep.
Okay. How about this one? Did it switch?
No, it's still at the 3.
Oh. All right, I'm just gonna, I'll stop. So I'll just talk through it then. Apologies, because I don't know what's happening. So on our medical staff, we have our Chief Medical Officer, who is Dr. Jonathan Finoff. He just joined us about a year and a half ago, I guess, in March of just like 2 days before we shut down for COVID. So he has been busy doing lots of COVID stuff since he came aboard, but he came from Mayo Clinic. He's a director of sports medicine there. So he's been a great addition to our team. And we have a mix of really integrated multidisciplinary PTs, ATs, DCs, our mental health team, a data team, and then our admin team who does a huge amount to support us as well. We do about 30,000 encounters a year, so a fair amount typically, though it's been a bit less, obviously with COVID. So going to get back into that. So to talk through the volunteer program, our volunteer program is typically 2 weeks rotation. We occasionally do 1 week rotations. Prefer the 2 weeks just because for continuity of care, it's preferred, but we can do 2 weeks. It allows us to, learn from a lot of you, and then us to hopefully share some things about what we do. Typically, we have about 200 different volunteers a year across all 3 sites. It's really an opportunity to engage. And so some engage with the different providers in different parts of the country and to build a network around the country for athletes. Our athletes are in actually all 50 states. And so, and the majority of athletes that go to the games are not at a training center. So it's really important for us to have good clinicians really around the country that we can tap into, and especially those that have understanding of sports or work with certain NGBs or national governing bodies. So some of the eligibility requirements, obviously a current license, and California is the only one you have to be licensed in California. Otherwise, we have reciprocity to be able to treat in both the New York and Colorado Springs clinics, and that's kind of up to your state boards. Some people have to report that prior to departing, and others don't. But I'll send out these slides to you so you can share them. But it has the excuse me, the link on our teamusa.org site where you can apply. And so with the application, you have to have just a copy of your license, any relevant certificates if you have the SCS or OCS, a copy of your current CPR and AED, malpractice insurance, and then a cover letter and resume or CV, a headshot, and then an application fee, which is $35. And that really just pays for the background check piece. So once those are in and it meets the criteria, so you have to have had at least 3 years of experience since licensure. We just try not to try new things on our athletes or test them out. And then there's a fair amount of people coming and going, and we just want to make sure there's some, you have some experience. And once that all of those criteria kind of meet, then we send out offer letters with a variety of proposed dates that we have requests in. So we develop requests based on, like, if we've got the games, we need to backfill, or we've got a big event coming in, we need to do that. Or if we know of a fair amount of staff are traveling to world championships or things like that, then we make sure that we've got good staffing coming in. And we will bring in providers from all disciplines of medicine. So you could be doing your rotation with a physician, and chiro, an AT, an MT, all of those. And typically in Colorado Springs, we can have usually we'll have up to 5 volunteers at a time. Chula and Placid are usually not more than 1 or 2, just given the size of their athlete load and needs. And each site has a little bit different kind of needs. So I'll go over that in just a minute. But we do a background check, a criminal background check, and then a medical credential review, just to make sure your licenses there's no actions against your licenses in any states where you've been licensed or are licensed. And then there's a required anti-doping training with USADA, safe sport training, and then we'll have an EMR training just to make sure we use GE centricity. So, and then you'll make your travel arrangements. At the moment, we're having to use Airbnb, which is a partner, and so we stay off-site in an Airbnb. We're hoping to move that back on-site to stay in the dorms, which is actually kind of a good. Kind of nice because the dining hall is there and it's pretty convenient and you have access to all the facilities. So we're hoping to get back to that once we open up again. And so some of the sports that you could see from a Colorado Springs perspective, we've got all the wrestling disciplines, men's freestyle, men's Greco, and women's freestyle. We've got track cycling, men's gymnastics, boxing. We've got judo, Paralympic swimming, Paralympic shooting, Olympic shooting. So a fair amount of sports that we have on site that you can go watch and cover. We do cover all the neurotrauma sports. So our gymnastics and wrestling do get full coverage for all their practices. And that's what volunteers will do. So that, and then Chula Vista is a bit more of a trauma site. So we've got track and field, which isn't so much other than pole vaulting. But then we've got rugby, archery, not so much, but BMX. And they have the new aerials track. And so actually more BMX tracks than pretty much anywhere else in the world, all in one spot. So it's sometimes they have quite some big accidents on there. So having a good understanding of trauma management is important at that site. They've had, they pretty much call an ambulance just about every week. We call one maybe every other week. So some pretty big injuries. And then they've got pair tennis as well. Then out in Lake Placid's all the sliding sports, so bobsled, skeleton luge, biathlon is out there, and randomly sometimes rhythmic gymnastics or artistic gymnastics. But those are the main sports. And then for the games, we just say, you know, it's not guaranteed that you get a games assignment after we go. Like I said, there was about 200 volunteers typically, and I think for the Olympics we had really about 10 volunteers that went to the games outside of those that worked with sports. So it's you know, but we have, like I said, multiple games. We have multiple opportunities to connect with NGBs. The sports usually come back to us asking for recommendations of good providers that would like to work with them. And so, you know, we'll send out blasts. Do you speak Spanish? Do you ski? And we're trying to capture those kind of things because sometimes they're looking for specific information. You know, some of them are kind of hard, like our Nordic ski team was looking for people that also knew how to do waxing of skis and things like that. So sometimes they're looking for some really specific information. There are people that have skill sets, but those are just great opportunities, especially on the Paralympic side. It's a different population than a lot of people have experience with. So if you've worked in the adaptive sports range, that's really great to have. And so those were the main pieces of the volunteer program that I had. So I'm happy to answer any other questions about that or anything with regard to Tokyo or the games, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I'm just curious too, like, so do you actually travel to every single of these games?
Yes.
So you must rack up a lot of air miles.
Yes. I do miss the junior. I try to handball that to somebody else for the junior events, the youth Olympic games, youth Paralympic. Some of those are pretty rough ones because usually we have a staff of 2 for a lot of minors. And this one will be interesting. In Colombia, the vaccine is mandated and their majority of them are minors. Family members can't come. So all the drama that comes with minors and parents from afar managing their child's injuries. So yeah, but and we'll have CLOs, which are the COVID liaison officers, which we had in Beijing, or Tokyo, as well, which is a big piece in just tracking down COVID testing and all the communication piece. So but there, some of those are pretty big injuries, especially on the summer side when we've got the BMX, some of the trauma sports or combat sports, skateboarding, some of those kind of things. Some of the X Games sports that are coming into the games are adding a whole new dimension from a sports med perspective. So
cool. I remember looking to the Sports Med Volunteer program probably about 13, 14 years ago. And I remember that you guys had a level system. Like, so the first thing was the 2-week training camp, and then it would be like a national sporting event, and then like a developmental games like the FISHUs or the Pan Ams, and then the Olympics would be like the level 4. Do you guys still have that kind of level system, or is it just—
No, we don't. We just take everybody, and as whatever opportunities you want to, some people do a rotation at every site or do multiple ones, or some people come through just once. And we just, when we're looking for games, we're looking for obviously skill set and fit, but obviously can I live in a very small space with you for a month? Because you're in a dorm room with them for, 5 people in a room for a month. So those kind of things, people tend to be different in a situation like that. So, but, we're really looking again at your skill set and how can you interact with teams, and then also where do you work? If we've got athletes in New Jersey all the time or in the city, can we send people down do you have a specialty? Do you have an interest in fencing or some of these sports that are located around that you could help support, or that we could be reach out to you as far as, do you know a good dentist in this area? Those kind of things. It's really trying to build a network of really good providers and connections around the country.
Cool. So who ultimately, like you said, the national governing bodies, like I know they make their own selections, like, and that I know that's constantly in flux, but how much of the team selections, for example, for Tokyo would be like the core versus like the NGBs?
So for the Olympics, we had 139 medical total across NGBs and USOPC. So USOPC, which includes our medical volunteers. So we had a total of, I think, 6 from actual USOPC employees, and the other 29 were volunteers, past volunteers from all disciplines of medicine. So the other 60 some were NGB providers that came. And so sometimes the NGBs have providers who are embedded with them, work all the time, like Marc and others. And then there's others who don't have anybody and they're looking for somebody. And so we connect them sometimes very last minute. Particularly at this games, we had a few providers who got positive COVIDs prior to departure and couldn't go. So we had alternates on our list who were already registered, and we could plug those into different groups. There's some sports that don't have any medical and don't have enough credentials to get medical. So we will assign some of our medical on the ground to cover those events. Like one of our PTs covered weightlifting. We had another one cover, what was some of the other ones? Powerlifting, our badminton, table tennis, modern pentathlon. Some of those sports just don't have much infrastructure or resources, and so we cover those events. And then we help to expand the needs. So if Marc's got a huge team that he works with, there's other sports that have really big teams and small medical staff. So we are there to help with the overflow. And if they're managing an emergency or medical situation, we can backfill and cover that. We had some pretty big injuries, so being able to do that is pretty important, to just step in, and whether it's BMX or fencing or whatever, that you can just be able to kind of step in where needed.
Yeah, no, like I think I was one of the bigger team sports. I did men's field hockey in Tokyo, and it was 18 guys and just me as the therapist. So I definitely used the massage therapist. I used the chiro. I just used everybody I could to help me out with that, just because it would just be burnt. I'd be probably burnt out. Yeah,
and that's a key piece, is knowing your resources and trying to be a team. You can't do it yourself, and especially on those sports that are there, team sports that are there the entirety of the games. It's a long month, long hours, and all of that. So yeah, gonna share the wealth.
Did anybody else from the talk or who's listening in have any questions for Amber?
Are volunteers contacted by the NGBs in addition to the USOPC? I think I understand. So we kind of have our list, and then we will provide, if they're looking for, providers who ski, then we can send out our blast to anyone who's interested. We give them all the names, and then the NGB will connect with you individually. So if there's a contract, if they're going to pay a stipend, whatever that looks like, we kind of stay out of that. We'll provide the names and, say, yep, they were great, and they had a great skill set in this area or whatever. But then we kind of leave it to the NGBs to do any sort of negotiation or that piece with you. I think if that was a question.
And another question, apart from like taping and emergency care, are there other skill sets that you guys are looking for? For example, sports massage, dry needling. I mean, massage, pretty much everybody has to be able to do it, but I know, like, do you guys look for specific skills like manipulation or dry needling?
And manual therapy is obviously a really key piece, whether that's manipulation, mobilization, soft tissue techniques, instrument assisted, dry needling. I mean, as you know, in sports medicine, there's always a fad of something coming through. BFR is, seems to be one of the latest. Cupping. So, you know, all of those things are nice because the athletes are used to it, but it's not necessarily mandatory. I think having an understanding of sport and elite athletes is really important, that these guys don't stop for anything. There's no kind of 3 days a week. They're seeing multiple things. They're competing and training multiple times a day. It's just a different kind of setup. So that's really important. The you know, being able to spine board, emergency management, how to do a full eval. I mean, we've had everything from you know, a burst ovarian cyst to a laceration of the liver to, you know, first rib fractures, lung, you know, all sorts of crazy spinal fractures. So not, you know, typical stuff we're learning in PT school. So it's just having a real good understanding of that. And then, you know, you're all the way down to your ankle sprain, acute management. All of our volunteers are on call as well. So we rotate on call and take that. So staff is on call 24 hours a day, and then that rotates through the volunteers. So you could get a call, especially if you're, you know, you're staying on campus. We have had everything from a stroke to you know, needing ice bags to lots of nosebleeds here in Colorado Springs, and, you know, illness, a lot of illness things. So that's another area where a lot of PTs aren't super strong in, is illness management assessment. Until recently, we didn't have a physician here. We had them kind of come in for sick call, but that was us. And we're the ones typically on the road with them too. So we're doing everything from the diarrhea to the ankle sprains and everything in between. There's no physician with us. So having a good understanding of how to do an assessment, what are typical vitals in an elite athlete, you know, over-the-counter medications and distribution of those, and the anti-doping rules that we can't give oxygen and those kind of things unless we're transporting them, how to use an EpiPen. And then on the Paralympic side, which is half of our population, just an understanding of some of those baseline disabilities, conditions that some of them have really multiple type of things in their background and really complex medical histories. So having an understanding of that. And then the mental health piece is really actually pretty big. We have a fair amount of mental health crises, and so having that, you know, being on board with understanding our mental health emergency action plan, just like you would for a cardiac emergency. So all of those pieces come into play pretty often.
Cool. Right. Any other questions for Amber? Anything on the chat screen? No. Another question I would want to add, and I feel like I'm hogging you, but for the LA 2028 Olympics, like, are you guys directly going to be involved with the how to like the host medical for that event?
To some degree. So we actually met with LA and Paris several times while we were in Tokyo, and are working with them. So it's called the joint venture. When we get a US Games, all of our marketing team from the USOPC shifts over to LA 28. So they actually shift companies. And so a lot of our resources and things like that go to the joint venture. And so some of those things we're working with them on sponsorships, on identifying locations of kind of who their partner is. Our National Medical Network partnership is kind of modified based on the games, on the LA Games, and where we get partnerships that benefit both the LA Games as well as us in the USOPC at this time until those games are on. So there's a lot of partnership around that, and we have a fair amount of say in that. They do have a pretty robust structure into that, but they will, you know, come to us with recommendation or looking for recommendations on the medical staff. And there'll be, as there was for the Salt Lake Games, you know, a huge need for medical staff and volunteers on the ground. I think they have a pretty good plan around pretty much everything. It's looking really good. But those are the pieces we know well. So we will definitely. It was good to chat with them, and a lot of like wide eyes when we were talking to them about some pieces that they need to have in place that I think weren't on their radar. So yeah, we're keeping a close close communication on that one, because that's going to be a big games.
And I guess everybody's going to have to be California licensed if they want to volunteer there.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. California, they change the rules a lot, so who knows? But yeah, start working on your California license.
We had a question from I think Ivana. She's just wondering what kind of certifications do you guys recommend?
Yeah, it's a good question. The STS I think is helpful. I think it's getting better, and I'm going to be careful what I say, but that's why I'm kind of involved. I try and get involved on the APTA side, because I've been pretty disappointed actually on a lot of the PTs that we've looked to hire, and some that have come through just with the sport experience, and where our test I think is not reflective of a lot of what we see in elite sport. I know I took mine several years ago, but there wasn't a single question on concussion on it. And I think that's definitely improved. And I became an item writer because of that. I was so concerned. And so, I think that's something that as professionals, we should continue to push that improves. To kind of make a comparison, the chiropractor's diplomate program is actually pretty robust. They have required courses they have to take. They have to do a practical. And so I know that when I get a diplomate chiropractor, I know that they already know how to tape an ankle, they know how to spine board somebody, some of those pieces. And some of the fellowships are, to be honest, kind of hit or miss with kind of the quality of those. So from a certification piece, the STS I think is good, but I probably don't put as much weight in it as
you like.
I guess I could, yeah. A dual credential is nice, ETC background. The CSTS is good because we do a lot of strength work, and I think that's something that PTs we do a lot of body weight, and in elite sport that doesn't get you very far. You've got to really push people. So having a good understanding of be able to speak that language with our strength coaches, and that is helpful. Manual therapy techniques, the dry needling, all of those kind of things are really helpful. There's not necessarily anything that we're always just really looking for. Some people have certifications in weightlifting or in track and field or some of those different sports as well. Some on the Paralympic side have certifications or are classifiers. And so if you're interested in the adaptive side, becoming a classifier is pretty cool to be able to, and that's where PTs are really needed, because you do all the assessments to identify which class an athlete goes into based on their disability piece. And so that's where those are almost all PTs that do classification. So those are kind of different areas, but even women's health or different things like that, I think are really valuable, even though we're not doing internal exams in the training room, we're having those conversations with athletes and being able to have that understanding. So I don't think there's anything that we necessarily shy away from or that we're always looking for. It's really a lot of manual therapy pieces. So, and strength, exercise.
That's why you guys have those 2 weeks to kind of really see if they can do it or not. And and that's one thing. And I'll talk more about it later. But with the Canadian system, like our credential system requires like 2 pieces of like practical examinations. That's probably one of the most stressful cases. Like the written parts are actually easy, or they're not that bad, but it's the practical where people get really nervous and they have to perform. But that's what you need to be able to do. Like high stress, got to be able to perform. So. So once you get through that, same thing, like you said, like they know that they can do it. Whereas like our exam's just, a multiple choice where you can be good or bad at it, but that doesn't necessarily mean.
Yeah, you're good at taking a test. So, so that's my side note, but.
Right.
And we do, we've hired several of our volunteers, and to just put in a plug, we actually have 2 openings coming up that will be posted within probably the next week, looking for, PTs, PTATs. So if you're interested or having, anyone that is interested, let us keep an eye out on that on Team USA or LinkedIn or those sites. So
you mean like a rotation, like a couple of rotations coming up?
We'll have rotations, but these are actually hires. We have
like full time.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've had a couple people have to leave the organization, so going on to bigger and better, great things. So that typically happens after the games where we have a little bit of a
Once they've gone
departure
through,
across the
like,
organization.
they've done the
But-
experience and then they want to move on.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, so if you're looking for a change, look for those to be posted soon.
Someone asked, would you be able to forward that link to the job posting for us? Someone just asking.
Yes.
about that.
Sure. They're not quite posted yet. We're just at our HR department getting all the final T's crossed and all of that. And then we are hoping to get those posted this week, if not next week, just because we're leading into a games. One of them will be located in Lake Placid, New York, and one in Chula Vista at the moment. So those are the two locations where we'll have.
That'll probably be listed on the USOPC website, right?
Yes. Yep. Teamworks is another site where there's a lot of sport postings. I think we'll have it posted there as well as LinkedIn.
Lake Placid's not that far from us.
Yeah. No. It's beautiful this time of year.
Is there anything else that you had in terms of recommendations, suggestions for people who are interested in going this route? Like trying to become part of the Olympic teams or NGBs. Like, I know for the most part, I mean, I don't know exact salaries, but generally speaking, you're not going to make a lot of money working sports. Like from what I've heard, it's great work, but it's because it's there's budgets and, it's not for the money and the glory. It's more for just, being able to do what you love and still get, paid for it. But it's not like you're going to make as much as say private practice or even pro sports don't even make as much as people think. Like the pro athletes make millions, but I don't think the therapists really make that much comparatively.
Yeah. Unless you're a data analyst, those guys are starting to really roll in it. That would be my next profession. Yeah, it's, I mean, we're a nonprofit, so we are not for profit. So that, I think probably all of us could make more money doing something else, but I think we do it because we love it. And we are, we're making an impact with these athletes. You get to hear the Olympic and Paralympic story every day. And I worked in pro sport as well. And so it's just a different feel in this world. A lot of these guys have other jobs, they're going to school, they're making minimum wage to live out their dreams for 4, 8, 12, 15 years. So it's pretty cool. And we have a great team that you get to be collaborative with and get to participate. We've got our sports dietitian, psychology, technology, like all of those pieces are really involved, which you don't often see in kind of a typical clinical setting. And then obviously the other side with the agents and the marketing and comms and pieces like that. So it's nice, and it's just it's different because we aren't the most important piece. We're important, but there's a lot of other pieces that go into the success of an athlete. And we're in the background trying to just make those little tweaks and keep them healthy and keep them out there doing what they love. But we're not here to be in the limelight. And that's why we're typically based in the basements of locations and things like that, working super long hours. I mean, that's what we sign up for, right? I don't think I slept more than 3 hours a night in the entire 2 months I was in Tokyo. So we had, teams arriving at 3 a.m. You had to schlep bags and get everyone up to their rooms and COVID test and take people for quarantine, that were in quarantine for their swab at 1 a.m, 2 a.m, and back at it again, on call all night. So it's not for the faint of heart. It's not glamorous. I did go to couple nice parties when I worked for tennis, but for the most part, it's a lot of hard work. It's not an 8 to 5 job. It's weekends, it's holidays, it's all of those pieces. And if you're not, ready to kind of sign up for that, then sports is probably not the right fit. And I think we've had, people find out pretty quick whether it's for them or not. And if they, I get that question, what do you mean I have to work on a Sunday? I'm like, that's when it's happening. And we're on call and somebody needs you. So if you're looking for kind of just a normal life, then this isn't probably for you. But it's if you like to be challenged, this is for you. Like, those athletes want to be better yesterday. They don't kind of care who you are and what, like they want to be your skill set, and they're going to challenge you and push you, which I love. Just that piece of being kind of pushed outside your comfort zone on a regular basis. Yeah, I think the first couple of years of my life on tennis, I was like, I don't know anything. Why did I even do this? Like, you just realize how much you don't know. And I don't know, maybe I'm a masochist, but I love that, being able to be pushed and learn new things, get to know a lot of different personalities from athletes, understanding some of these sports that you've probably never seen before, and the nuances of them is really cool. So yeah, and I saw the Ola Grimsby. That's a great program. I did an additional program out in Australia, at University of Melbourne, a degree in manipulation and sports there, and so and I've worked over in Australia a fair amount and around the world with different providers. And so I think if you get those opportunities, it's pretty cool to work with people. A lot of internationally, Canada as well has a lot of great osteopaths who are not typical DOs like ours in the US, and that have really good manual therapy skills and do some pretty cool stuff. So opportunity to work internationally, I think, is really something I would recommend. Just never work alone, always try and work with different people that have different skill sets than yourself, because there's always something you can learn from people, different providers, and including, ATs, DCs, massage therapy. I mean, some of the best manual therapy skills I've learned are from phenomenal MTs who just are really good with body work. So yeah, I just don't put on the blinders. Just make sure that you get out there and volunteer, and get to know sport, and put in the time. Sometimes that's what you have to do. But yeah, it's hard work, but it's pretty rewarding and a lot of fun most of the time.
Great. Well, we're just going to move on. Thank you so much for your time. You're welcome to stay on and listen to the other speakers, but I know you have to run. But if I don't get a chance to say thank you, definitely thank you so much for joining us, and definitely very appreciative. I'm sure everybody was really excited to hear that you're speaking, and hopefully a lot of us will be in contact with you later for just to start with the program. I know you probably know Shelley Weinstein.
Yep,
She's the Cogent Step. So I emailed her about some stuff because I work for her, and she was saying she's trying to get off her butt to do the 2 or 3 week stint so she can get involved at least with if not Paris, like 2028. So she's definitely getting inspired to do it.
Yeah, Paris is going to be amazing too. Yeah, sailing is in Tahiti, so just throwing that out. If you're into sailing, we're going to be based out in Tahiti. But yeah, we'll send you the PowerPoint that I apologize for some reason wasn't showing, the links so that you can register. We'd love to have you out as a volunteer. Would love to just work with each of you, and also the job postings. Once those are up, I'll send those your way.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time.
Take care. All right. Next we have Ken. Ken's one of our committee members down in the Cherry Hill or Philly, close to Philly area, and he did a 2-week stint at the Colorado Springs USOPC Training Camp 2018, I believe you said. So I'm just going to have him take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. So I'll try to be quick, guys, because Ed and Marc both have Olympic experience. They're going to be able to talk more to it. My time in Colorado was awesome. I actually got an offer letter today to go up to Lake Placid next month, so that's going to be kind of fun working with some of the Winter Olympians too. So what I'll tell you guys is like Amber said, go through the application process, kind of get started with it. And then once you get the offer letter to go out, just be prepared to jump in. I think working out there in Colorado, it was 8 to 6 each day or 8 to 5 each day. You get a schedule. There's some patients on your schedule, but then there's also holes in your schedule. So during those holes, they might have you. I had to drive a boxer to go back and forth getting MRIs on her hand and her foot because she was only home for 3 days before she had to fly back out to India. I had to cover gymnastics. I had to cover wrestling. And then there's also downtime during the day that if you don't have patients, they just tell you to be within, like a textable range, because somewhere in California, I wasn't getting good cell phone service, or Colorado. But at any rate, you can go and watch some of the practices. You can go and kind of talk to the strength and conditioning coaches. You can talk to the massage therapists. And that was the part of the experience I thought was the coolest. In physical therapy, we know a lot of stuff. But out there, I mean, our team, it was an orthopedic surgeon, a massage therapist, athletic trainer, a chiropractor, and you can kind of pick everybody's brains on how to get that athlete the best, the quickest that you can. The other thing that I'll kind of tell you is they're always watching, like Amber said, you know, they're kind of assessing you while you're out there, you know, so they're not looking for you to come out there and necessarily light the world on fire and show them the best technique they've ever seen in their lives. What they're really looking for is a teammate, somebody that can work in that interdisciplinary team, work in a pressure situation with high level athletes and, you know, hold their own, and somebody that can kind of make that team better. The other thing that I thought was kind of cool was like Amber was saying in Colorado, they have like the whole second floor of the building. I think there were 3 different mental health offices. So they really encourage this with the athletes. They really encourage the athletes to, you know, take that break if they can, because these schedules, I mean, these guys and girls, I would have a cup of coffee in the morning trying to catch my breath from walking in Colorado for the first day, you know, and these people are doing one-legged hops up and down all these stairs, and they have breakfast, then they train, and then they do PT, and then they have lunch, and then they train, and then they do PT a second time, and then recovery. So their schedules are just absolutely insane out there. The on-call things that she was saying, that stressed me out, where you had to have the cell phone and just, you know, pray to God that it doesn't ring overnight, which mine thankfully didn't. So hopefully that continues in Lake Placid. But it was definitely a super rewarding experience, super fun experience. I learned a ton while I was there, you know, and it's something I'm happy to talk to you guys. I'll make sure Ed's got my email address. So if anybody has questions, you know, specific, I'm happy to answer them kind of about this process. But again, Ed and Marc, having been at the games that just happened, I kind of want to hear them talk more than me. So feel free to give me an email with any questions, guys.
Just one question for you.
Oh, sure. But
just what current sports are you covering? I know you run 3 different clinics now, your own, but do you are currently active covering sports on the side still, or?
Not as much. It's actually we're at 7 clinics now, so we're kind of
7,
growing a little bit. Yeah, kind of growing in South Jersey. But yeah, so no current sports. I treat a ton of upper body, a ton of baseball, you know, tennis, volleyball. I see that a lot in my clinic. You know, as far as specific sports, I always try to shadow. So I don't know if any of you guys are talking about getting your SCS or want to get the hours in. Some athletic trainers are more, you know, kind of welcoming to that shadowing experience than others. In my area, you know, it's a little tougher to kind of shadow with some of them, but in some of the other surrounding towns, you know, they'll have you for any football game, wrestling match, baseball game, just hang out, pick their brains. And don't be afraid as a PT. Don't think something's below you, or, you know, don't think, that's not my job. I mean, there are some athletic trainers, you're in there doing laundry with them. You're in there, you know, doing what they do, because that's really what that on-field coverage, that's really what that experience is giving you, is learning that side of it, learning what that acute on-field sports management is like.
Cool. All right. And any other takeaways from your experience at Colorado?
Like I said, you know what? So the other thing that I thought was interesting. So, you know, for PT, we do our hands-on part, right? And then there's always some kind of exercise part afterwards, some kind of corrective. So in Colorado, a lot of the athletes, I mean, they've been through exercise before. They kind of know what to do. So the majority of people that I was working with, I mean, it was pretty much hands-on the entire time I was working with them. There were some that I could get into the gym, and some that I could get into rehab, some that I would meet down in the actual strength and conditioning gym. But most of the time you're doing a half-hour, 40-minute session of just, you know, kind of getting on somebody and working on them. The other takeaway is you figure they're seeing you for, you know, 2 weeks, and then they'll see the next person and then the next person. So, you know, don't be afraid to kind of ask them, hey, what's kind of worked in the past? Here's what I like doing. Don't be afraid to get that athlete's feedback, because you figure that athlete has had how many different hands on them. And like Amber was saying, I mean, they train their whole lives, and they might have one like 4 to 10 year window to really put their name and get a gold medal. So, you know, don't be afraid to kind of get their opinion and get their input to how you can have a better treatment with them.
Are the athletes kind of like you on like a couple week rotation training camps, or are there some of them literally just training there all year round?
Yeah, when I was in Colorado, so there's that NGB term that Amber was throwing out, the national governing body. So different sports have different amounts of money. So in Colorado Springs, they had dorms, and if you're going out there, just be alert that you might have a roommate. So yeah, that was a surprise. So you're back in the college days, but at any rate, your sports, some of them pay Colorado Springs to have the athlete there. So some of the guys and girls that I worked with, they live there year round. They train there year round. Some live in the surrounding town. The one time, the first week I was there, the world's team for men's wrestling was there. So those guys were just there for the week, so we were kind of working with them, those acute injuries, working with anybody who was there but injured from before. We were kind of trying to replicate their rehab program, until they flew back home. But for the most part, in Colorado, at least, most of the athletes I worked with lived right there.
Okay, cool. All right. Any questions for Ken? No. All right.
Cool.
Well, let's. And if you think of anything else, just feel free to chime in. And we're going to move on to Marc Nowak, who is no stranger to the Olympics since Tokyo was, I think, his 5th one. You can correct me if I'm off there.
Yeah.
And then, and I'll let you take away. You've been with U.S. rowing for all 5 Olympics, correct?
That's correct. So I had a different experience. I've been practicing for about 20 years, and
Sorry, you just cut out.
okay, how's that?
Yep.
All right. So I've been working already 20 years, specialized in shoulder, knee rehab, and some spine work. And our referring orthopedist, main referring orthopedist in Jersey, was the MD for the U.S. rowing team for about 20 years, Tim Hosey. So back in so I'd seen some rowers, a spattering of them from 92 to 95. And then we relocated the office to Princeton, which is pretty much a mecca of rowing, from junior to collegiate at Princeton University, to the elite rowers to masters rowers. So we started getting more rowers in, and the women's team was having some low back difficulties, a lot of lumbar herniations and things of that nature. So I sort of got put in with the rowers and taking care of the women's 8. And next thing you know, they were asking me to come along with them out to training camp and the 2003 World Championships. So, I was on the road with them and quickly learning from this guy, Vinny Comiskey, who is out in Chula Vista. He taught me how to pack a training bag and all the things that go with it, from medication to things that you need on a training trip, as well as competition. We did, I started with 2003 with Worlds, and 2 trainers. It was Vinny and then Lisa Haas from University of Michigan. Learned a lot from those guys as to how to handle yourself, not in the clinic, but on the road. And having good manual skills, is so tremendous, because whatever you do, you have to pack up and take with you. And 9 times out of 10, that's really your head and your hands, and what can you do with them, and how well do you cope with on stress situations, injury, acute to getting them back to racing in sometimes a very short period of time, 1 or 2 weeks at most. So really understanding that acute phase of it, both mentally, physically, spiritually, and how to cope with that. So next thing you know, I was asked to come to the 2004 Olympics. I wasn't credentialed with that, going through the USOPC, but worked on the athletes from there. Got through that and went up men's and women's 8. Did really well, medaled gold and silver, and I was hooked. We were away for a month, and it was probably the most nerve-wracking thing not to screw up. And it's the Olympics and this and that, and I think I was exhausted and exhilarated all at the same time at the end, hardly slept, and, just worked. And I was like, this is for me. So from that point forward, I really took over the men's and women's team, and I pretty much managed, which is up to, 60 to 70 athletes myself, along with clinical caseload. And we wound up, just having 3 days in the clinic, just athletes, and then, my regular caseload. So it was a lot of work that went on till 2008 in Beijing. Went to the Olympics again, wasn't credentialed because Lisa Haas from Michigan was. And you only have so many credentialed clinicians going to each Olympics. So, I was not credentialed, they were. And, went through that Olympics. But I took care of everyone for pretty much individually for all the world championships in between. So, for the 3 years that are non-Olympic, I took care of the men and women for world championships, World Cup racing. You travel abroad with all that. I think I've been to every continent, except for Australia and South America. And, take those things on the road and be able to, treat athletes, really just having a table and your bag, and that's it, and, there's not much equipment. I have some bands and things of that nature, but it's really, a lot of soft tissue work, joint mobs, recovery, flushing, things of that nature. I had an athlete, it's 2010. She was a stroke of the 8. And she came in, I can't turn my neck. I was like, when are you guys heading out for racing? She goes, in 5 minutes. I was like, okay, I got 5 minutes to manipulate your thoracic spine and neck. Boom, everything's good. And get out. you gotta get on the boat, and, those are kind of the pressure situations that you have. 2013 or 2017, we had a gal with a subclavian artery occlusion. Her whole arm blew up. Had to get them home, and, realizing, we sent them to the hospital in Poland. They didn't find anything. And it's like, now I've seen this before several times. It's, you got to go home, that's it. And fortunately got her home without incident, flying with an occlusion. And they found a 4-centimeter occlusion in her subclavian vein that had to be surgically removed, along with her rib and things of that nature. So, finally, I wound up getting credentialed for the 2012 Olympics in London. I did my stint in.
Marc, can I just stop you for a sec? We have a question from the audience that you kept saying about you weren't credentialed yet, but so what does that actually entail? And what does that mean when you're credentialed?
Credentialed for the USOPC. So meaning that when you're credentialed, now you're allowed everywhere. So when I wasn't credentialed, I really treated out of the hotel. Anywhere but the venue. So you're really not allowed to treat in the venue itself.
Is that the same as accredited?
Yeah, I guess,
when you get your little name tag and stuff that allows you everywhere.
Right. So I didn't have that till 2012. And I did my stint in my volunteership at Colorado Springs, took care of boxers to Olympic wrestlers to the gymnasts, and some junior water polo players, and got a lot of great experience with that, and bloody noses and mouses on eyes and all kinds of different things. So, it was a great experience that way, but that got me to be credentialed for 2012 in London, as well as Tokyo and Rio in 2016. So, among all that, again, just taking care of athletes through those time periods. We won 12 world championships pretty much in a row. In the interim of the Olympics, 3 Olympic golds in women's 8, Olympic silver in 2004, and then same thing with the men's boats, medaling in 2008. And some other smaller boats, along the way. So, I think the biggest thing is, for me was to, hooking up with the NGB. In 2015, I actually joined US Rowing. became the director of athlete wellness, at that point. That, includes seeing athletes. You're really the gatekeeper for their medical care to send them out, to an orthopedist, or we have a sports medicine physician, Pete Wenger, who joined us in 2015, and coordinating with them, working on expediting both care through utilization of ultrasound for rib stress injuries, rib fractures, things of that nature, so the athlete can see how they're recovering, how the bone is recovering, or tissue, great for tissue tears, things along those lines. So the athlete knows, we know, how this is progressing. Are we pushing too fast, too hard, too slow? How's it going? As well as their subjective complaints, as well as your manual techniques and what you're feeling clinically. So it's great to coordinate all those things. And then, we set up, a communication system where it's, really real-time access for coaches to understand how their athlete's doing, if they came in for rehab that day, and are there any red flags? Are there functional changes, training changes, things along those lines? When are they able to come back? We have that on a real-time Google Doc, and created that whole system. So we have weekly meetings with coaches and the medical staff as to athlete status, what we expect, how this is progressing, and or do we need to wait and possibly do modified training until they're ready to compete or ready to fully train with the team again. So there's a lot of quick decisions that need to be made. The pressure's there all the time. Like Amber said, coaches and athletes want to be better yesterday. It pushes you mentally into developing systems and situations that you can get them back faster. It's always a challenge to get an athlete or anyone really to to get back to full health as soon as possible, and use as many different techniques, weight training activities, muscle activation techniques, that joint mobilization, tissue mobs. You start becoming a jack of all trades and picking and utilizing what you need to get that person back, and then how to articulate that to coaches and athletes. Mental health individuals are also on those calls, nutritionists, and get those athletes what they need ASAP in order to get them better. So, it's really, you become a coordinator of different skills. And if you don't have those skills or things aren't working, it's immediate. Like, you immediately go to the doc. It's direct access on steroids. Like, you just can't, you have to assess what's going on, make decisions really fast, go see so-and-so, better safe than sorry. Do we know what's going on as fast as possible? Because we have to explain it to the athlete and the coach if there's, downtime to be had. So, over 20 years, really kind of honing those things down and trying to make them, as good as possible. And, I transfer those skills onto, I do a lot of rib injury assessment and mobilizations and movement and retraining. I've used them also with mastectomy patients, with people, general people who have thoracic spine injuries, and from tennis players, volleyball players, anything that's shoulder related, even pitchers. We found pitchers with stress fractures. So we look at those things and go, what's the similarities between rowing and pitching, and how do we address these things? What are the commonalities and the functional commonalities that are creating these problems? And then also too, looking at the thoracic cage, even with chronic shoulder injury. So it sort of enlightens you to, kind of look down the chain. Are we looking with shoulder injuries far enough into how the thoracic spine, thoracic cage is moving, and, they're breathing, things of that nature, and then how that affects their function, not only for the athlete, but for the normal patient, as well as, as, providing maintenance type things that we do with athletes to, your arthritic patients and things of that nature. It all fits in kind of the same way. So, all those skills that you have, I found that they worked extremely well, and, just applied them to rowing, which at the time really had almost no literature whatsoever as to how to treat many injuries in rowing. And I deal with really, loosening scapula, hips, and we found just, tight hips sink ships. So keep the hips mobile and allow the athlete to hinge over their hips when they're rowing. It keeps the spine herniations down. Like it's, just things like we're not only into, into treating these things, but to prevent them, and constantly working on maintenance to prevention. And it's that wellness is taken to the next level, and it's really exciting. And I think it's where PTs really, it's like the next vista and onto where to go, as well as kind of managing things from that wellness aspect. It's kind of like the Chinese method. You really shouldn't get paid until you get paid when they're healthy, and when they're not, it's like, this is a problem. How do we fix this? Not, if you let the problem happen, it's almost a disaster because it's going to take time off. So how do we keep them from that, and having PTs into that mindset, not the ex post facto type thing, but really being ahead of the curve? And how do we manage that? And how do we think in those ways? When we're used to really getting patients from physicians, I'm actually dishing them off to physicians now, and coordinating that treatment, and also explaining things to coaches. So and then I've given talks to coaches about rib injuries, spine injuries, hip problems, hand hygiene, things happening from chronic gripping and blisters and calluses, and how that affects hand function to forearm function, nerve restriction. Takes everything, nerve glides, you're looking at courses to take, and certifications. It's really, nerve tissue, going from their neck down to their fingertips, gets involved. And how do you release that? And, all those little things come in handy. And it's really, how do you apply that to the sport that you're doing? And really just getting started and not being afraid, and really pushing yourself. And, I work constantly, I probably, my typical day is 13, 14 hours when full team is there. And, started taking weekends and things like that. But like, you're on a training trip. I was out in Chula Vista for 3 months in my dorm room, and working at really a sports medicine clinic. And that's kind of it, so your days are long. It's 7 days a week, no days off, and you're going. So you really just, it's a labor of love. And, I really, you just get involved with it. You're evolving, the athletes are evolving, and really whatever it takes that you do that to get them better, faster, to do what they're great at, and it's kind of it, in a nutshell.
The good thing is our careers are a little longer than their careers in terms of being able to work in that environment, right? Because you can only be a high performance athlete for so long.
Well, I've had some that were, Megan Calmo, I think, she started in 2007 and just retired last year. So it's getting longer, and, we're seeing, I'm focusing now on junior level. And that's too, where getting into NGBs and getting into a sport is really, starting with juniors. I started screening juniors to understand what went on with elites, and seeing that these same problems develop as they develop in their careers through juniors, then collegiates, now elite level, and really attacking the junior level and educating development rather than competition, and how things move instead of just pulling hard, and who pulls hard and who doesn't, and, focusing on how and how much, and recovery. And it's really, like we got to pitch counts with throwers. It's like, should there be training limits, for repetitive stress injury with rowing and other sports? And, work with fencers, and, you see a lot of the same things going on again and again. And we're training juniors just way too hard, and they're burning out both mentally, physically, spiritually. I'm seeing a lot more, collegiates that my sophomore year, I call them 2 and outs. They got through their junior level, it got them into college, and then by sophomore year, they've had it, and they break down one way or another. It's like, how do we prevent that? And, how do we, make them successful and develop them rather than just burning them out and, going from there. So, it's, just a great career. I think, yes, you're not going to, make the kind of things that money that you can make with, private practice and things along those lines, but it is amazingly rewarding. I'm challenged every day, and there is no ruts. It's just push, and go. So if you're into that, God bless you, and let me know if I can help you, then I'll be glad to. If you have any specific questions, let me know. I know I covered a lot of stuff, but
there's a question from one of the guys in the audience. He was just asking if you screen like the juniors for like arm length ratios, and if you notice like there's certain types of ratios that are more successful in rowing.
No, I don't screen them for that. I screen them for, I'm looking at scapular strength, instability of the shoulder, rotator cuff strengths, hip mobility, gluteal strengths, because oftentimes their glutei are restricted and choked off because they're sitting in a hard seat with a hole in it, and it chokes off their sciatic nerve. Looking at hip function, shoulder function, those are the 2 main things that I really focus on, and found that we need to maintain and have those working appropriately throughout their careers for them to really do well. Their core strengths, things of that nature, arm lengths, things of that. I mean, I've seen rowers that don't look like rowers, people that come in with all different types of morphologies that really do well, and some that are, you look at them and they should be great, and sometimes mentally they're not there, or they break down for other reasons. They're how they function in the boat, things of that nature. So kind of stay away from that. And when I look at athletes, it's like, what and who am I dealing with, and what's present, and how do we make that the best that we can? And you just don't chuck anybody out. And I've learned that from coaches. Like, even they don't know, and even some kids, or some elite athletes show up and they don't start producing for like sometimes 2 or 3 years, or sometimes they're sent away like, you're not that great, and come back, after personal training and personal coaching, come back in 2 years and just kill it and become 2-time Olympians. We try to pencil things in, and I've learned that just, it kind of doesn't work, and you kind of deal with what's in front of you and make it happen. So I've focused on that, and I've learned so much from just that alone, dealing with these athletes.
Cool. So do you see anybody from private practice now, or is it strictly
Yep.
you rowing people now?
Now that COVID has calmed down, when we had Edison put in 2 articles about COVID and what happened, it got in the New York Times and things of that nature. And we really cracked down on everything. Once, COVID hit, about 12, 13 members of the team and myself. And I saw no one then from the outside. And it was for their protection and ours. We just kept it as athletes, and we did not have we had 1 case in 7 months before, we went out to Chula, and that was from somebody catching it from a host family member. So, but we quarantined that immediately, and no one else contracted it, so, we did it. Once that happened, it was like lights out. This is all we're doing. We have to focus on the Olympics, make sure these athletes are safe, make sure that our people are safe, and go from there. Now that, people are vaccinated and things of that nature, I'm seeing junior athletes again, host families that have hip replacements and what have you, as well as, masters rowers and all kinds of different. So I'm starting to build that back up again, which is healthy. And I like it because it's just a different conversation you're dealing with different adults or kids. And it's good to keep you in the know, as to how to deal with different individuals and not just elite athletes, and keep yourself in touch with all that. So yes, I do.
Yeah, no, the reason I asked is just because I know finding like working at those games, like because you're required to get such a quick result right away, I find those skills translate over to like the general population really well, because you need immediate results, but who doesn't like immediate results, right?
Exactly. And the same techniques work, whether it's a masters rower or, I've had swimmers, masters swimmers, and, just general athletes. And I've had chronic problems from college or college sports, things of that nature. And you've learned techniques to make it go fast. And, that's what you want. I'll see somebody once a week and it's plenty, we'll take it from there.
We just had a question from Dave. I'll just let him ask it.
Sure.
Yeah, Marc, I had a question. Like, do you guys measure internal load, external load? I've been getting into the acute chronic workload ratio. Do you guys look at that at all, or is it more biomechanical?
It's more biomechanical. You got to realize, with these athletes, they're training 3 times a day. Their workload is huge. So, the coaches take care of their strength training as well as what they're going to do in the, in the morning session. They'll row or erg, depending on weather, come back in the afternoon, erg, up 12 to 16K, in the morning, in the afternoon, weight train after that. So your job is mostly management of recovery, and getting those tissues back, getting those joints back, knowing when too much is too much. You need to back down or modify this and that. You need a day or two to recuperate, and why, and kind of take it from there. A lot of that, you're really working in a system, with coaches and, strength coach to, the training coaches, to the rowing coaches. So really these athletes are going all out all the time. And they look at their load cycles and they will take that up. And oftentimes, if there's a problem, let's say we could have windy days like crosswind for 2 weeks, you're going to start seeing rib injuries just because there's a crosswind, and their bodies have to adapt to that. And you could tell on their bodies and their tissue if they've changed boats, if they've changed, if the weather's changed, if they're big boats to small boats, sculling to sweeping, all those kinds of things really show up in their bodies. So, there's a lot of different factors involved with that, and their loads are pretty much dictated a lot by their coaches.
All right, do we have another question from somebody? No? All right. Did that answer your question, Dave?
Yeah, that was good. Thank you.
All right, cool. One thing you said you became the medical coordinator for US Rowing in 2015, correct, Marc?
Yeah.
So did they have that position previous to that, or was that created specifically for you?
No, it was I was working with, Somerset and Robert Wood Johnson, and they were just curtailing what I was doing. And, I talked to the CEO of US Rowing. It's like, hey, it's time to bring you over and just do this full time, because the work was there. And, and at that point we created that job, and I pretty much wrote up what that job entailed and said, here, present that and see if they take it.
Do you find that that's happening more and more with the NGBs now? Like they're hiring their own full-time?
Yeah, that's, and that's, I think that's, it's a good thing. There's consistency. At times it's so disheartening, I think, from the athletes that I treat, that you have to explain yourself in 2 weeks to a whole nother person. And when you have consistency, I know where, I've treated some athletes for 10, 12 years. Like, I know where your problems are. I also know when this is an emergency, when this is a red flag, or this is just something that you go through and we're just going to get through it again. To have that knowledge, which with each person is priceless. And, I really, it seems like, well, isn't it boring? It's the same thing. And it's like, no, there's different aspects of each athlete. And also you start to understand how one body part affects another. and really looking holistically. You know, if there's a rib problem, it could be coming from the fact that their hip is not moving, and they're not hinging over, and they're reaching with their upper trunk because of that lack of movement, and start to put things together in ways that you just don't do typically.
Yeah, no, just what you said really makes huge sense, because I mean, if you're seeing another therapist for another trip, let's say, like, and then you know that if you were on that, if the athlete knows you were on that trip, you could have helped them with this because it's something you guys have dealt with. It would be very disheartening for somebody who's about to compete for their final or whatnot.
And I've seen it. I've been at Chula for like 3 months and then see swimmers or some other team come in, and it's just different people with that person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you're comparing, well, what did somebody else do? How did this work? Like there's none of that, you know, with the, you know, with US rowing. It's like, hey, I know everybody. I know their histories. I know, you know, everything that's gone on with you for as many years as you've been here. You know, well, let's get to work. And because of that, if they just mention one thing, it's like, what's going on? And it's like, this and this is acting up or what have you. Let's get to work, you know, and you already know what that feels like. You know what they feel like, what's, you know, what's tension and increased tissue restriction or spasm for them, what isn't. Oftentimes one person, you know, that will stop the level of irritability will stop one, and is common for the other one, you know. So it's like you get to, you know, you really get to know these people and how that works for them, and really focus on that.
The 1-0 slider is outside, 2-0.
Anybody else have any specific questions for Marc? I know it's we're running a bit late, so I'll try not to make my part too long.
Okay, thank you. And if anyone has questions, Edison, you have my contact information.
I've got your info. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
All right, have a good night. Pleasure talking to you all.
Thanks. And then I'll just try to keep mine short and sweet. I actually got to meet up with Marc for lunch in Tokyo, so it was great to be able to say hi and shoot the shit, so to speak. In terms of where I'm coming from, and if you want to kind of work in the Olympics or a higher level of sports, I would say, just like Marc and Amber have kind of alluded to, it's building those relationships, and you got to be able to live with these people and working well. Everybody's got to have good skill levels, so you're not going to make it to that level unless you're good as a clinician. But I think the biggest thing is that you can work well with the athletes, get to build that rapport really quickly. Usually when we talk about sports medicine, there's the 3 A's. So there's availability, affability, and then able. So able means like last priority being like you're just able to do the job and you're good with your hands and manual skills. First thing is availability. Like if you're on call and you don't show up, or you're not getting there, or when your teammate is looking for you and you're not there to treat them, then you basically let them down already. Availability also includes, like, you know, if you can go on a trip last minute, like Amber said, some people had to cancel last minute. If you're able to jump in there and like, for example, when I went, it was like literally 3 weeks before I had to go, and I was able to make the necessary arrangements and get to Tokyo. And the second thing is affable. So you got to be able to get along with the coaches and the athletes. And when you've done it at the high stress level, for example, like Olympics or games, that's where they know that you can handle the requirements of the job, and you can get things done in a short period of time. Like one of the therapists that worked with a lot of the guys in Vancouver with the team I worked with, which is the Canadian men's field hockey team, he unfortunately wasn't long listed. So long listed means you got to be, as Marc kind of alluded to, credentialed ahead of time. You got background checked, EMR, safe sport, especially with all the Larry Nassar things. So there's all this extra training that we have to do every year. And long listed just means you have the potential of being selected for the team. Doesn't mean you're going to go, but if there's a last minute need, for example, with COVID, there's always a chance that someone could drop out or whatnot. And in like a big team like the US team, there's definitely that shot. With me, the guy who was treating them in Vancouver, unfortunately, wasn't long listed. So he couldn't go with them. And the person who just became the head therapist was an athletic trainer, and she didn't have the skill set that a lot of the older guys had been around were looking for. And unfortunately, during COVID, there was no in-person training. There's no courses being for anybody to take, so she couldn't be trained to get some of the skill sets that they were looking for. And I just happened to be, and again, this is where the relationship building comes in. My name was dropped in a bucket from someone who was with Track and Field Canada, and someone who had previously been with the parasite of Track and Field Canada was now the team manager for Field Hockey Canada. So somehow they got a word of me, and they saw my resume, and after talking with the head doc and the therapist that was treating them, they decided they go with someone who had more experience, who had been in the game. So again, but that doesn't come without, you know, having been around and developing those relationships. From the US side, I've been trying to get in on teams as well. Like as Marc mentioned, he actually used to work for the same group that we belong to, like SPTI, which became part of Somerset Medical. Marc eventually, I thought, was going to retire, so I was hoping to kind of slide in as his apprentice or understudy, but unfortunately someone else, and she's very qualified, Katie Jackson, who's another therapist who works out of the Princeton office, and she was a rower at Notre Dame. She's kind of taken over that role, and I think she's being groomed to kind of take over his position. But it's those kind of relationships that, you know, you need to kind of foster. Some of it's location, because you got to be willing to move, and being in Princeton, that's where the National Training Center is. So obviously that's a good fit. And I think, as Marc alluded to, he kind of just fell in his lap. Like, he just became someone that the U.S. rowing team couldn't do without. Other opportunities can come up depending where you live, and it's also if you're willing to travel. I was the DC USA Rugby medical coordinator when I was back in Washington, DC, and I was also the head therapist for Potomac Athletic Club, one of the U.S. Super League teams. But when I moved to New Jersey, for me to continue working at that level, I'd have to commute for an hour to New York City, and having a newborn, I wasn't willing to give that up. But, you know, obviously there's opportunities missed. One of the guys I talked to was Mike Fox, who's now with, I believe the group's called PT in Motion. And they're the groups that officially sponsored the Rugby United New York club that plays out of Coney Island. And one of his guys now is the head therapist for that Major League Rugby team. So again, it's, you know, it depends on what you're willing to sacrifice, but there's, with any sports, like Marc said, there's a lot of sacrifice involved, and it's not a lot of money, but if you get to do what you love, then, you know, you don't have to really get paid too much. I could go into a whole bunch of other things, but definitely having spent about 20 years in the Canadian system, I've kind of built all those relationships, and I've kind of wanted to keep those fostering those relationships until I can, until they don't select me anymore, basically. So for me to spend 2 weeks at Colorado Springs, I have to compare that to, and paying my flight out there, comparing to getting paid airfare and room and board to go out to Tokyo. I think for me, it's like, I'm definitely going to pick Tokyo for that. So until they stop selecting me, I'm probably going to continue with Team Canada, but I'm still looking for, you know, I'm still doing local coverage. Like, I've been involved with US Judo. We have a doctor that we work with that has done some of the work with the national team, and one of our former co-workers used to, or is still competing with Cranford Judo Club, who has a number of potential Olympics coming up. So again, just getting yourself out there. And I think we're going to try to create more opportunities for you guys if you guys want to get involved in New Jersey, because there's definitely need for sports PT out there, and we can't let all the, not there's anything wrong with them, athletic trainers, but, you know, like, I think because PTs do get the thought of getting paid nothing or next to nothing for doing this kind of work, you know, scares some people. But it personally, like I said, like, I'm glad I get paid a pretty good salary that I can take the time off and do this for fun, basically. And I think if you don't lose sight of why you started doing it, which is to help those athletes and to compete at the best they can at that level, I think the money is always going to be, you know, I mean, all of us as therapists make pretty good money. So, I mean, if we can afford to take a few weeks off to help these guys, I think it's worth it. I mean, these guys have committed their entire lives to training, and like Amber said, pretty much most of them are not going to make a lot of money off of it, yet they still commit their pretty much day in, day out for years before they can even hope to qualify for Olympics. So for me to be even part of that and commit a few weeks a year is really nothing, considering that I was never going to be able to compete at that level. I'm sure a lot of you guys probably feel the same way. And but just like the athletes, you guys have to compete, you got to be available, you got to put in the time. And without getting any more detail, there's so many other relationships I wanted to get into just to give you an idea of how many things you have to foster. Just one, I guess one example of that would be meeting the CMO, Mike Wilkinson, for the Canadian medical team, and talking to him. You know, part of it is socializing with doctors and other staff members. And I probably worked with at least half the core staff already in the past 20 years. After speaking with Mike Wilkinson, who was the former NHL doc for the Vancouver Canucks, I said, "Oh, nice to meet you in person finally." And he's like, "Oh, we've met." And I was thinking, I'm pretty sure we haven't, because I would have remembered it. But again, having heard my name and being in the circles, and we finally figured out that he was the head doc for Rugby Canada when I worked with the team 20 years ago. So I would have had to have dealt with player medicals and talked to him about cases and stuff. So when you're in the loop for that long, people know that you're not in it for the money, you're not in it for the glory. And, you know, at that point, he's already proven himself. So they're all really laid back people. So, you know, the guy I roomed with is the team doc for the BC Lions professional football team for the last over 20 years. And, you know, he goofs around and he, like, you know, chit chats and stuff. And he's been to like 6, 7 Olympics, I think, himself. So just to be around those kind of people and share those experiences, and the stories they have are, like, you know, phenomenal. So to be on the inside, like, you know, when you hear about, you know, the whole Simone Biles thing and how it played out on TV, and you know, I hear it from the athletes competing directly with her. Like, I was in the same treatment room as Ellie Black, who was the Canadian gymnast who placed 4th right behind her, her bronze medal. And to hear her talk about how amazing Simone Biles from someone who actually competes directly with her is, you know, it just doesn't get any better than that. And to speak to him in person. So those are the kind of things I relish. Or, you know, literally living in the same dorm room as I don't know if you guys watched the US Open with there's 2 Canadians that were in the semifinals, especially the girl who was in the women's final, Leila Fernandez. Like, so I mean, she was literally like a nobody when I was in there, and she was part of the doubles team, but she was there in the hallways. I remember seeing her and Felix, like, who I think was in the men's semifinal, and they were just like kids, basically, like they're 18, 19-year-olds walking around in a dorm. So and then to see these people obviously come into their own is pretty neat. So when you watch, like, I watched the women's final for like the whole thing, because, like, you know, now you kind of feel like, oh, I kind of know this person, even though I didn't meet them in person. And I think that connection is something you can't put a price on, even though I technically didn't get paid a cent to go to Tokyo. So did anybody else have any questions in general about making the Olympics, or anything about working high-level sports or games?
Hey, Ed, Mike Dunn here.
Hey,
I just wanted to just point out, you know, especially if there's any young PTs on this call, and, you know, the 4 speakers tonight, all talking about 15 or 20 years of experience until you get to the level of the Olympics or where you're going, and even just the volunteering aspect, you know, just to let everyone know, start at your local high school. We have a lot of local small colleges in New Jersey. Start there, work with athletic trainers, because that's where you start your networking, and that's where you start your skills. You know, you don't want to be at the Olympic facility or at the Olympics when you're the first time you're running out on the field to work with an athlete and see how how you can handle an injury. So, you know, it's the information we got in this talk was phenomenal to hear all these experiences, but just, you know, for everyone, we all started out young volunteering, and like everyone said, it's a grind. You have to put your time into it. Nothing's just going to be handed to you, and you have to find your niche. But you just start working, you start volunteering, you have to go outside the clinic, because I'm a PT and an ATC, and I will say PTs don't know anything on the field. You have to gain the experience to learn something on the field. So again, work in local high schools, local colleges, and then, you know, it's years of work until you get experiences like the 4 speakers tonight.
I would agree with that. I got my start at the University of Toronto, which you could compare to like a Division 2, 3 like college, and that's where all my connections started from, like Rugby Canada, like athletics, wrestling. That's how it all started. Like just making those, like you said, all those connections, and then it all comes back. Like, because all those guys move on. Those guys, like, it could be a junior coach It could be, you know, and they move on to college, and then they from there, they move on to pros. It's the same thing. They kind of move those levels. And if they remember you working with them in high school and it's like, hey, Mike, this guy was great, like, you know, and then you're still involved with it, then they remember those things.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know if it was Amber or Ken said earlier, you know, you just work with different specialties. You know, you work with an athletic trainer, they know how to tape, they know emergency medicine on the field. We know rehab and post-op sometimes a little better than them. You just share experiences on how to work. You work with a chiropractor, you learn what they're doing, like they said, and it's again that networking and learning different specialties and you learn manual skills from that. So people were talking about what class to take and what certification to get. Sometimes it's just go meet people and you learn from their experiences and you get hands-on experience and learn techniques just from that. That'll make you a better therapist in the clinic and on the field.
For sure. Anybody else want to share their experiences? Dula, I know you're a PTATC as well. Do you have any thoughts?
No, just keep working to strive for collaboration. I do know, actually, we have a pretty good connection through ATSNJ. So if there's anybody looking to partner with an athletic trainer and you need help making that connection, don't hesitate to ask. We can help with that.
Cool. And I won't tell Vlad you're probably applying for that Lake Placid job. No, just kidding.
You can tell him that's fine. Epic's driving me crazy.
Any other questions about? I know it's been a long night, so I understand if you guys don't have any questions. If you guys have any other questions, you guys want to ask us later, I have everybody's emails, so I can contact them, and you guys can reach out to me if there's anything that you forgot to ask. I'll try to get the minutes or as much information as we kind of learn from everybody. And this will be, I think we are recording it, so hopefully we'll be able to post it up somewhere on the website so people who missed it can view it as well. All right. So unless anybody has any other questions, then I guess we'll call it a night. I know it was a long one, so. And we'll go over the meeting stuff in an email if you guys are still interested in the other information. All right. All right, so thank you very much, everybody, for joining us, and I guess we'll see you next time, and we'll let you guys know what when the next meeting is in the email or the minutes. All right, have a good night.
Thanks, Ed. Take care.
Yep. Have a good night, guys.
Good night. See you tomorrow.